The panel in which
Yes.
one of the major speakers referred to practitioners as mechanics.
Yes.
Mere mechanics,
Yes.
I believe. Yeah. Well,
all right. So for today's episode of the podcast, we are just the two of us, Sarah and I, sitting down to talk about some of the issues that happen in the field of behavior analysis, but also the issues that seem to be apparent in no matter what profession you're in, right? And how we're trying to include that strategically, because Pat was comfortable talking about it, but also because it's something that our rapidly growing field is running into. And I think now, I don't know if this is cliche, but now more than ever, like we need to be working together on these sort of things, right? So for anybody that may be watching this that doesn't have the context of this, like when I say issues, like can you do a little justice as describing like what kind of goes on?
Sure. I think part of this is simply a function of growing pains. So Jim Carr has this great data out of the BACB and a graph that I've shared a number of times in different talks that I've given in terms of the growth trajectory of behavior analysts and of RBTs, and looking at kind of the trend line in the year-over-year growth in our field right now is about 30 to 40%. And, is that data meaningful in isolation? Not necessarily, but when you look at it relative to the growth in other fields, you understand that we're on this incredible growth trajectory. And, with incredible growth comes some unique problems. Some of those are infrastructure related. In behavior analysis, like how do we, as a field, have the appropriate infrastructure to support all of these new people coming into the field, the vast majority of which are practitioners, the vast majority of which are people at a master's level, they're not PhDs, and the vast majority of people that are practicing within the autism services sector. So we have a big field, it's a growing field. Most of the people that are clinicians and certified professionals have been certified for less than 5 years. Almost everyone is serving people with autism. Almost everyone is practicing. So what do we do about that? And Pat talked a little bit about this, and I really appreciated the more historical perspective that he was able to offer us. In terms of really seeing like where did the field start, and really our field started more in education. A lot of work was focused on people with developmental disabilities. Behavior analysis was crucial in kind of the deinstitutionalization movement, but people were really kind of like basic researchers and scientists, and those are the people that used to be at the conferences. And as our field has shifted to be more of a practitioner focused field, the infrastructure and the support mechanisms that have been in place for behavior analysis haven't shifted to meet that need. And I think that's where some of this kind of growing pains and friction comes from, is you have some of the entities, national entities, and even, at a state level entities that were really created more from academic institutions, by academicians, by people that are engaging in research, because that's where the field started. But where it is now is largely in the practitioner space, which is what you see like in medicine, for example. I mean, obviously you have a lot of people that do medical research, but the majority of people that get into medicine to practice it, because it's an incredible helping profession. The same thing for speech therapy or psychologists or occupational therapists, physical therapists. Almost everyone is a practitioner. And so I think it's been challenging for our field to understand, how do we shift in a way to meet the growing needs of this field that has distributed very strongly towards this one population and is also getting younger and younger and less experienced by the day. And so, it's almost like this is a monster of our own creation. We've wanted behavior analysis in the mainstream. We've wanted to find the best way to kind of break out from underneath, these kind of obscure departments or, kind of single subject research design. But in doing so, we kind of like broke open, and now we're having to play catch up with what do we do, in terms of even like standard setting, outcomes, there's massive labor shortages right now at all levels of service delivery in behavior analysis. And so again, I think Pat has a more kind of moderate perspective on it. It's like, yeah, this is just kind of part of us growing up. And at, some point the, pendulum needs to swing a little bit the other direction, and hopefully we'll land somewhere in the middle. But I think a lot of this tension has been that where behavior analysis started and the roots of the research that was, done by B.F. Skinner has really changed. And especially like, I think a big kind of phase change line you can identify is Ivar Lovaas's research out of UCLA in really kind of doubling down on how effective this behavior analysis can be for persons on the autism spectrum. That set us off into this different trajectory. It also opened up doors that I don't think we could even imagine.
Oh yeah.
And changed, lives and had this kind of positive impact that I don't think, even Ivor himself would have been able to conceptualize at the time. But again, it's created, a lot of, kind of growing pains as a result of that. And so we're kind of in the midst of what I always categorize as this like awesome opportunity. Like, guys, we can really work together to figure this out, or we can like spectacularly screw it up. And I don't know kind of which way it's going to go yet.
Yeah. So when we were on site with Pat, and this came up as a result of a discussion about one of his articles about my heroes.
All my heroes are cowboys.
Yeah. Can you just give a 30-second, too long didn't read of that real quick?
Sure. I mean, and it was a really brief article that he wrote, and it was the whole idea of really trying to celebrate the practitioners within behavior analysis. And one of the things that Pat talks about in this article is, hey, if you're going to go somewhere to try to get some training to be a great clinician, are you going to obtain that training by other people that are doing it every day? Or are you going to only obtain that training by people that are teaching you about it in an academic setting, but not necessarily doing it? And he's like, I'm throwing my hat in with the guys that are doing it. And, he mentioned how he uses medicine actually as an example in that article, that people go into the medical profession to be a practitioner. And so practitioners are revered and really valued in medicine. And in behavior analysis, that's been a very challenging thing for us to do. I think even myself as a master's level behavior analyst, sometimes I wonder, well, who do I think I am? How do I have the audacity to talk about the things I talk about or do the things that I do? Because I'm merely just a master's level behavior analyst, but we are the majority of the field. Yeah. I want to say that roughly 85% of certificates are at the master's level. And this was a big point of discussion at one point in the field is, do we make
that's what I was going to say is the conference in which Pat had resigned and the issues were going on at that point, not that they don't continue to go on different ways and whatnot, but like that specific one that he was talking about was the first ABI that I attended. And so I walked in and I believe it was the business meeting where people were like, it's really, or there was a special panel. It was the panel that he discusses in both his articles as well as that we have on tape. And I walked into that simply off of a mentor saying like, this is going to be a pretty important discussion to go into. And I remember standing in there and within 5 or 10 minutes, the security cops being called and like, it was very heated. And I was like, what field did I just step into? Yeah. Like where, and that was something that I asked myself, and that was not a judgmental statement at the time. If anything, it's just like a little bit of, I felt like at the moment, juicy drama, like what's going on. And like, I need to learn more about this sort of stuff. But I guess as the field's rapidly expanding and these institutions are there, I think there's kind of two parts here. There's a really big need for the history of those organizations, the importance and the why of those to be shared.
Yes.
And so continually and routinely, I find folks that find them through social media channels often. There was just an Instagram live that I did a few days ago with some folks where the majority of people that were tuning in, 100 or so people, hadn't heard of the Association of Behavior Analysis International. And I'm like, this is like
that's a concern.
Yeah. And it's mainly because of the rapid growth of things, I think, and just people are focusing their attention on certain parts of it. And like you're saying, our infrastructure and things like that. It's not throwing shade to anybody. And it's like, I guess I want to tackle topics like this and put things out there because I've found so much wealth and valuable knowledge through those sort of organizations, right? And on the other side of it, it's like I feel like we do a disservice if we're not talking about in our own bubble, which is the point of this piece. It's not in the public documentary piece to go out there. There's no point in putting those things out there. We don't want to air potentially what people perceive as dirty laundry or
right.
things like that out there. It's just meant for an internal discussion and look at what's going on. And this is where folks that are coming up in the field, if you don't know the context of the issues that have been going on in the past, we're a historical science, right? Like it's hard to understand where we're currently at and what's going on. And,
Yeah,
and
but I also think part of the reason that people don't understand the historical context, I think there's two primary reasons for that. I think that one, there's been gatekeepers that have not shared the historical contents and their context, and not to be morbid, but as more and more years pass, and as we continue to lose some of the people that are the founding fathers and mothers of behavior analysis, that history is lost also, because largely a lot of this is an oral history, an experiential history. And, you can only have so many people experience something in a graduate program or in a board of directors. I see this just because I've experienced it myself in behavior analysis. There's kind of this group of people that I think are responsible for a lot of decision making that happens in our field at a national and at a statewide level. And those people run in a very different circle than, let's say, your average behavior analyst, even though the numbers of your average behavior analysts are far greater. And so in the absence of information and good dissemination mechanisms, people kind of either fill in their own make up their own story, or they disregard. And so they just don't see the relevance. And so what
that's what I've been seeing going on. And I guess what I was trying to declare here is like the point of stepping into this area isn't to ruffle feathers. It's to set that context and put a place out there to where people can understand what's going on. And what I really think that Pat does a great job with is, as people have seen, like it's an emotional piece, but it's something where he continues to actively try to step between these two communities of the practitioner and the scientist
that both need each other and
100%
forever.
Yeah.
there can be no divide. We don't exist without one or the other. It doesn't exist.
And that's I guess the void and intention as to like why to even tackle these topics is to fill that void and try to create some unity around that. And so with the draft of the teaser that I showed you of things that we're putting out there, they're meant to be emotional. It's an emotional moment in that room. Like it had all of us.
Sure.
Emotional.
And honestly, if you're not feeling emotional, like get out of the field. What we do is hard. We're dealing with people that are in crisis. We're dealing with people that are in pain. We're dealing, with people that are dealing with disabilities or other issues that they never thought they'd had to. And if you don't have emotion about it, why are you here?
Yeah.
Why are you here?
100%.
And I think as behavior analysts, we sometimes, emotion is, too mentalistic. No, we can operationally define that.
Yeah.
and I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that we're emotional about the work that we do because we're a human service profession. If you don't care, get out. But we have to channel that care. And I think instead, what I see so much is this kind of almost like fear-based responding of, well, we've always done it this way, and so we need to continue to do it this way, versus understanding that, gosh, as things kind of shift and grow differently as our field has matured, as we've been able to, we have licensure for behavior analysts in 30 states, as we've had, autism insurance legislation enacted in all 50 states in the US. We have to be willing to understand that where we started isn't where we are now, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. And then I think as leaders, and especially for people that are in more kind of like senior phases of their career, what is our responsibility to that next generation, and how can we kind of galvanize and really support the sustaining of behavior analysis, which is ultimately going to come down to good technical application of our science. It's going to come down to people being interested in doing good work. It's going to come down to us setting standards of what that work should look like and what outcomes that should be expected, because we're also drawing down billions and billions of healthcare dollars right now, for which we, are responsible for, ensuring, social outcomes. And, Rachel Taylor brought this up when we talked in LA, making sure that those are, both impactful to the, client, to the family, but also to the community at large. We all pay for behavior analytic services through our taxes and through our healthcare premiums. So what I think that I really do believe that we can get there where we place an emphasis on the crucial importance of the science, of always continued and ongoing improvement of your practice, your scope of competency, and really bringing people in to want to continue to do better without shaming people because they haven't published a research article or they're not a PhD. I think we can do that, and I think there's some emerging leaders in behavior analysis that are really doing that too. But again, part of this I think is just, again, it's just a snapshot in time. We've just grown so quickly, and so we need, I think, to give all of ourselves a little bit of grace in terms of the amount of time it takes to put some of this infrastructure together. But I also think it's up to all behavior analysts to also demand more from their national associations, from their state associations, and be clear about what their needs are. And it's up to those associations to really be able to hear what the needs of their constituency is, not just make assumptions based on their own experiences.
And my last thing to add there, because it was beautiful, would just be that the folks that don't necessarily know what these things are, just hearing about them for the first time, realizing that there's a system there, and it's there because it's been valuable to some sort of degree. And it's what is that value for you? And so even as a practitioner, you might find something that's just fantastic out of a very hard science or very scientific thing, or organization, entity, whatever, like regardless of what it is, even if there's that disconnect, there's still going to be people there, whether it's networking opportunities, things like that. And that's part of what I hope people realize as well, is that on top of what you're saying on how we need to focus on people speaking to and associations of things matching up what the needs are, as well as the practitioners and the scientists working together on solving things and collaborating, is also there's value that these organizations provide beyond those two things. And it really comes down to you learning a little bit and realizing the value of them through reading up, consuming, asking people, trying one out now and then, and seeing what these conferences or other things are. And that's, for me, having stepped into that first ABI, realizing these sort of issues, and now 10 years of continued issues, seeing them going on all the time, day to day, and being consumed partially in it as like part of my job, is that no matter what those issues are, there's still great people in those organizations, and it's not the people, it's the circumstances, right? And I will continue forever going to many of these organizations, regardless of their direct value sometimes, just because I can, even though it might not be directly applicable to me, we're all learning how to work together more and more. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. Okay, I think that was kind of a little bit of the context and like intent that I wanted to share here as to why we're even dabbling in these topics in the first place. So the trailer on this topic is meant to be a bit emotional. It's meant to get you interested in these sort of things.
It's a little provocative.
I never said, I'll resign, but that was in there between the lines. I wrote a resignation letter.
I read it.
Oh, you did? Okay. And sorry, it's the hardest thing I've ever done.
And the goal there is, that's how it feels sitting in the room with Pat. That's, I don't want to say how he feels about it, right? But like, it's clear that it's an emotional thing, but it's also clear that these sort of things hopefully can be used to leverage and get more people to work together and move this field forward. So hoping we're doing that justice.
Word.
All right. With that said, I guess we're out.
We out.
We out.